Woo! All right, guys. New year 2026. I'm still behind on videos, but that's okay. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to get it started. So let's go. Wildcats, episode 8, Betrayal. Let's go! Woo! Hey, everybody. Welcome to the channel. This is Lazy Brown Productions with your boy D. Wesley. And today, as I said in the intro, I'll be going over Wildcats episode 8, Betrayal, for Tubi, and we'll go ahead and start the review. So pretty much with the Wildcats, it starts off where the heroes, where Spartan and Zealot are going over where they've looked and the orb could possibly be. And now the orb is pretty much a item where it grants unlimited power to dominate the universe. So they pretty much are going over it, and they're talking about how it can't be here, it's not there. Of course, Marlo, he sits here and says, like, what about this dot right here? And we find out that no, that's where Blackbeard's treasure is buried. And Marlo's like, whoa, hold on. How you know that's where Blackbeard's treasure is located? She goes like, oh, because I helped bury it. That's a nice little tidbit of information, and it's a nice little callback to these guys. Some of them are actually centuries old. So that's a nice little callback, and we kind of see more of Zealot's past. Honestly, I wouldn't mind a whole series just kind of focused around her. But either way, so he says, why don't you tell me? She goes like, the way of the warrior. Okay, lady. And plus, I don't think that you need the extra money. You're already a billionaire. And that's when we see Marlo's more entrepreneurial side, his greed, where he sits there and says, you can never have too much money. And Grifter agreed with the man. Honestly, I would like to see Marlo in like the DCU, or incorporate into more of the DC universe and not just Grifter or Warblade, but we'll see. So you then see Spartan pretty much ask, where is Warblade? And everybody's pretty much saying, well, Warblade is getting ready for a tournament. And with that in mind, we find that Spartan is pretty much worried that Warblade is becoming too obsessed with the tournament versus being more focused on trying to find the orb. Meanwhile, on Hellspawn's side, we do see that Hellspawn's concocting another evil plan. He tries to tell his men, keep searching for the orb, build the supercomputer, all that good fun jazz. But his men are kind of worried because the Wildcats might come and foil their plans. Hellspawn goes, don't you worry about those Wildcats. Because we see that Taboo is creating a device that's supposed to keep the Wildcats at bay, or maybe it's supposed to finish them off, I don't know. And that's pretty much where the premise of this whole episode starts. We then switch back over to where Spartan is checking on Warblade, and we see Warblade, getting ready for the tournament. And Spartan's pretty much explaining to him, like, it kind of seems unfair for you to, use your powers and all that stuff. And that's what Warblade said, I don't gotta use my powers on him to beat him. So, with that in mind, that's when we see a dispute between Warblade and Spartan ensue, because Spartan wants Warblade to focus more on trying to find the orb. Warblade's pretty much saying that, look, I'm already having all my computers run all the diagnoses. We don't even know where it could be. Heck, Hellspawn might not even be able to find it himself. They don't know that, technically speaking, Hellspawn has a way to find the orb, but they're still trying to search. And that's when Spartan tries to remind him that, hey, listen, we're in the middle of a war. You cannot sit up here and do whatever you want, or pretty much saying, like, trying to remind him that he has more important priorities. And that's when Warblade comes back, snaps back at him, says like, look, I had a life before this. And that was more important than this precious war. You guys dragged me into this. You guys are the ones who put me into this. And this competition I was preparing for my whole life, which now, in my opinion, it makes sense of why when we first met him in episode 1, he goes like, I'm a super tech genius, but I'm also a martial artist. And he started throwing hands. So at that point, while they're still going back and forth, Marlo comes in to break up the bickering. And that's when their whole headquarters get attacked by Hellspawn. Hellspawn goes and attacks, and then that's when, the Wildcats go ahead, they start fighting. Marlo's also trying to help the fight. They're going back and forth. Not sure, the Wildcats are unsure why they're attacking, but that's when the villain, Taboo, who was seen with Hellspawn earlier, I should have explained her name, but that's when Taboo comes in. He goes like, Jacob Milo, I've been waiting for you. And so then that's when she shoots him. And he gets hit, blasted back, and that's when Warblade, who happens to be at that vicinity, says, Milo! Fade to black. And we're back. So they're sitting there and they call in and say like, yo, Marlo's hurt, blah, 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 blah. So then we find out that they got what they needed. Hellspawn and Hellspawn's lackeys and Taboo, and so they dip off. So they go to check on Marlo, and they say maybe we should take him to a hospital. And that's when he wakes up and says like, no. Do you know how much they cost to those medical fees? Which is funny because this is the 90s, and one thing that stay consistent is people not wanting to go to the hospital because of medical fees. Even billionaires to say like, I'm pass on that. That is money. Bump you. So with that, everybody's like, okay, well, he must be fine because he's still like being Marlo about it. So with that in mind, we then switch back over to Hellspawn, and we find that, as suggested earlier, he was trying to build pretty much a supercomputer, and he needed certain parts from the not Hellcats, Raw series. He needed a certain device from the Wildcats headquarters to help build the supercomputer. And we find out that he's using a supercomputer to pretty much build a device that will analyze the stars that happened at that same night of when the orb was lost, or last reconned, or whatever it was, or last reconned. So he suggested going to go build the supercomputer. His minions are still worried about the Wildcats. He tells them, don't worry about it. We got something planned for that. So then we switch back over to where Warblade is getting ready for the tournament. He's running all his computers. He goes like, there, I got everything running. So now let's go ahead. So I should be good to go. And something packs up, then we will know. So Warblade goes ahead and dips on out. And when he dips out, that's when Spartan says, hey, Warblade. Warblade all angry looking, because, he's supposed to be like the Wolverine, but... And then that's what Spartan pretty much says. Go get him. Bring back the gold. So, that's a nice little tidbit. That's a nice little shout out to a friend saying like, yeah, yo, man, we might have argued, but go do what you gotta do, homeboy. But, yeah, so that was a nice little thing. So, after that happens, we then see that a little time passed, and the Hellspawn and the Wildcats have picked up a signal that the Daemonites are pretty much building a supercomputer in what looks like the Arctic or some type of cold place. I don't know. And that's when Jacob Marlo tells them, all right, Wildcats, go ahead and head on out of there. And so they head on out. As they head out, the minions have seen that the Wildcats have been spotted. But the Wildcats cloaked their ship so that way they couldn't be spotted more by the Daemonites. At that point, that's when Hellspawn decided that he'll activate his device. We find out that the device that he hit Jacob Marlowe with earlier, or I should say, Taboo had hit Jacob Marlowe over, it pretty much allowed Hellspawn to take control of Jacob Marlowe's mind. Jacob go ahead and uncloaks the ship or the plane, whatever their transportation is, to uncloak them, and at that point they allowed the Dynamites to shoot down the Wildcats. Of course they're fine, but that's when Void has noticed something was wrong with Marla and detects that there is a Dynamite item on Marlo that's pretty much controlling his actions. So Marlo, or Hellspawn, takes her out so she couldn't do anything to help him. And Marlo, which kind of shows he has a very strong will, starts fighting back. And that's when Hellspawn says, like, Jacob Marlowe, do not resist. You cannot do anything, and I will make you do what I want. So, evil bad guy speech, typical. So once he starts doing that, we then see that he's resisting it. He goes, not if I let you. Sorry. So with that in mind, he goes ahead and he has handcuffs in a certain drawer. Or he goes over to a certain drawer, gets some handcuffs where there's a gun at, and he locks himself to the drawer far away from the computer that can mess things up, and throws the key away. Hellspawn gets pissed off and tells his crew, hurry up with that supercomputer, start scanning those stars now. And then we switch over to pretty much, well, of course, we know that Wildcats at this time are wondering what the heck's going on here, because they're getting pinned down. Marlowe pretty much tells them, go, go, go. You got to get the device. So they're trying their best. We then see that, because apparently he still has communication to get to them. We then switch over to Warblade. Warblade is trying to, what's the word I'm looking for? Warblade is trying to, so we switched over to Warblade, where he is pretty much in the middle of the competition. And we see that he's facing the champ. Jacob Marlowe calls him. He goes like, Hellspawn has control. Don't help. Wink. And that's when Warblade's like, crap, I gotta do this. And so he knows that it was code for it to go. It was, kind of obvious. So with that in mind, he transforms into his Wildcat form. He goes like, listen here, old boy, you got lucky today. I got things to do. So he rips it off and he dips out. Everybody's shocked. And the one guy who's the champion kind of just, he faints. So at that point, Warblade goes over to where the Wildcats are and he helps them out. They manage to destroy the supercomputer. And when they destroy the supercomputer, they go like, yeah, Warblade. The Wildcats like, yeah, Warblade, thanks, man. Yeah. Typical 90s fashion stuff. And with that in mind, that comes to an end. So then we kind of get are you okay? So then, we then reach over to where the Wildcats are back at headquarters. They've gotten the transmitter off of Marlowe. And with that in mind, we then see, Cats reminiscing, talking about, hey, sorry that you couldn't finish your competition. And, Warblade's not too beaten up about it because he sits there and says, if I really wanted to win, I know I could have won. So there's that. We then end the episode with them worried hoping that Hellspawn did not achieve his goal. We then switch over to Hellspawn where, well, I should say on Hellspawn's side, we see that he is pissed that it didn't work. He punishes Taboo for the failure of the machine. So at that point, he's pissed off about it, mad at the Wildcats destroyed the supercomputer. But something that Wildcats don't know is we see that Hellspawn now has location of the temple to where the orb is now located at. With that in mind, we now transition to what will happen next on Wildcats. And yeah, so here are my thoughts on it. Give me a moment. This rock is very, very cold. I won't even lie to y'all. But hey, I'm back in my thinking chair. So, what are my thoughts? Honestly, it was a solid episode. I usually don't like mind control episodes because it's just feels so underhanded. And I get that's why villains do it in this great story plot. But it feels so underhanded, and it just always makes me on edge of, are they gonna figure it out? Come on, guys, you gotta know that that's somebody, not it. And it's also involved the destruction of somebody's name, and now they gotta clear it. And you know, it leads to great drama. It's a great storytelling device. It's just not one of my favorites because I just feel like it's so sleazy. It's one thing if a person's betraying somebody. It's another thing if you're literally being mind controlled. So I was going in there like, okay, let's go ahead and do this, but it wasn't a bad story. I don't really call that betrayal though, because if you're being mind controlled, is that considered betrayal? I wouldn't call that because you literally don't have control over your actions. But overall, 7 out of 10. I would say a good sit down and watch, you know, when you're bored and you have nothing else to do. If I had to say something was, I like this episode because it does do nice callbacks of some of these Wildcats do have lives outside of the team and outside this war. So it makes me wonder, like, when the war is over, how are some of them going to spend their day-to-day lives? I can also say it was kind of funny seeing Spartan try to remind Warblade that you have a responsibility outside of, you have a bigger responsibility than this war that's going on right now. When it's kind of funny because in the earlier episodes, Spartan himself thought about giving everything up for his fiance. So you think that Spartan would have a little bit more of an understanding, but I do like that it didn't turn into a full-on fight where Warblade leaves the team and Spartan's like truly contemplating on it. It was a really quick resolve where it was just a disagreement between co-workers. It was a disagreement between co-workers. So I like that. Marlo, to me, is hilarious because it showed more of his... He is a stingy little something, and he is a billionaire, and he tries to save as much and paint pictures as much. But no offense, he's one of those ones where I understand, because if you have a team like the Wildcats that's constantly destroying stuff, and you have to send them out to different areas, and you have to constantly do maintenance on computers and the jet and everything. Like, yeah, if it was me, I'd be very painting picture too. So bump that. I don't care how much billions of dollars. All that can be gone like this. And I find it hilarious that earlier in the episode that he had told Void to make sure she noted where the Blackbeard treasure was. And she said, oh, I already did that. So, you know, they like this. They like this. You know, they see each other. They're like, I see you. Don't worry, dog. I got you. And I think Grifter would love to go in on that and get some of that money. So it's always interesting to see that. I would have to say, I wish that Marlo kind of did have some importance. I wish they kind of used Wildcats more in the DC universe. I mean, I feel like you can have some good stuff in there if you incorporate them more. You can even incorporate them with milestone characters, and I feel that would be at least they have somewhere to go. Because right about now, they've only used Grifter and Warblade, and that's more tied with Batman stories. So, at least from what I've seen, I could be wrong. But who knows? Maybe in the future they will use them. Who knows? But other than that, though, again, it was not a bad watch. 7 out of 10. It's a good sit-down watch. So, actually, no. I'll go with it's mid. But on that note, go check it out. I'm gonna try to see if I can wrap this up because it's been a minute and I want to get back to a lot of more Tubi stuff, especially some other shows I've been putting on the back burner. But on that end, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope y'all have a great day, and I'll see you later. Peace.